Didn't you have an anecdote that you can share with us, Anthony, about your developing interest in these matters in the occult, and maybe a slightly haunting, scary story that went along with that you can share with us?
I've got a couple actually. I can start with a shorter one just to kind of ramp up if that's
Yeah,
cool with you.
let's just do a teaser. Let's do a short one.
So we had just moved into a house that was owned by a church. Eerily enough, this
Was it a
church,
satanic church?
I mean, they weren't nice. They sold it from underneath their feet. It was very unpleasant. But
Oh,
anyways,
okay.
this house was creepy because it had old school like doorbells with hammers that hung in like a kind of a right at the foyer at the stairs. And we got legitimately creeped out of that house because in the dead of night, those bells would start playing in the same like discordant series of tones, like at 3 in the morning. And it would wake us up from a dead sleep, and it was just like a bang of bells. But the creepy part was it kept happening in the same order. It was Westminster chimes. It was not supposed to do that. So
Hmm.
we kind of started to get a little creeped out with that house, and they had a creepy basement with like stonework that we actually literally covered up because it was drafty and cold and gross, and we were worried about mice getting in. It was just a creepy place. Anyways, so one day I was taking care of my kids because at this point in my life I was working a split shift where my wife was working during the day and I'd work at night, and that whole crappy story. But as I was taking care of my two kids, I was about to go change my youngest, who was my second son at that time, and I walked underneath this stairway. And I was sleep deprived at that point because having a brand new kid, you know what it's like, right?
Right.
Pardon me.
Oh
Anyways,
yeah.
anyways, as I was walking underneath the stairs, out of the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a woman with a dress passing by the stairway and going down the hallway out of view. I'm like, "No, I'm just tired." And then my oldest son, who was standing right next to me, looked at me and goes, "Was that mama?" And I was like, so
Oh
immediately
damn.
after that, I go, "All right, we're
Oh.
strapping the kids to the wagon. We're going around the block until your mom gets home. I'm not dealing with that. I can't deal with that." But yeah, the creepiest thing about scary stories is you think you see something, but when you're with others and then they confirm
They
you
see
see,
it too.
that's not a welcome sensation.
No,
So
no, that
you weren't giving your 2-year-old son the hallucinogens.
No, not any of that. I mean, not that they tell you about.
Right. So
Well,
that's when it gets corroborated, you're right. That makes it very much crazier.
right.
Um, Kevin, do you have
no,
something to
I
share?
don't have anything like I mean, I've got a couple of things like I mean, and again, this is probably purely coincidences, but the day, were you there with us when we bought the Necronomicon at Read More Books?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, we have
Remember
some
we saw that car,
Necronomicon
we
stories.
walked out and we saw that car and it had 666 on the license plate and
Oh,
completely like,
right, right.
we're like, oh my God.
there is something to that though, and this is the funny thing because one of the how we approach the angle of magic is that I wanted to actually study what it was, and the interesting thing about coincidences and how they relate to the experience is essentially when you're talking about these experiences, you're talking about talking to an entity, of seeing an entity. How do you
Yeah.
think that's occurring? Of course, it's a hallucination. It can't be anything else. You can't explain it any other way.
Right.
So it's something that's occurring within your head. Now, I studied this in context of, brain anomalies, like things that have been attached to the brain. One of those studies I took was within the field of telepathy, which people mistake to think of as reading another person's mind. Now, I could go on and on, and I won't because for the sake of brevity. But, anyways, the real aspect is sharing thoughts. And the interesting thing about this kind of phenomenon is that when you're looking at paranormal stories, when you're studying these things and looking for some sort of verifiable unknown quantity, you want to look for increasing numbers of coincidences that are noticed by all involved. And this, like I just
Mm,
said, corroboration. When you see
yeah.
numerous, like when I'm listening to someone tell me a story that they saw a ghost. First off, you already get the assumption that's incorrect. They're saying, I saw a ghost. Well, no, you're not telling me what you saw. Let's just talk about what you saw. Let's not name it just yet. That way we can actually really work through it and see what you're attaching to it that
Mm,
doesn't really
mm,
belong there versus what actually happened. But
right.
a number of coincidences, then my interest is piqued, because then you have this aspect of something actually kind of spooky. The best paranormal stories involve numerous coincidences all centered around the same kind of theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. So seeing 666 after Necronomicon, I wish so I don't know if you know this, Kevin, but my best friend and mentor was the artist of the Simon Necronomicon.
Oh yeah. That's why it was.
Yeah,
funny about that.
I told him.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
we'll get into that actually. That's a really fascinating aspect to this.
Yeah.
Not too many people can say that.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, and actually, I just gotten a phone call. Apparently, no one can say that because, anyways.
Oh, right. No, we're gonna get into that, but we'll get in more into the Necronomicon burning too, Kevin, because that involves you as well.
Yeah.
Burning?
You know, and then, can I just add one more?
Yeah,
one
please.
more before you get into it.
Go ahead.
So the only other thing that happened to me that was somewhat, I don't know if supernatural is like the right word, but I was sleeping one night. It was like late, and Monica was, but my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, was spending the night, and she woke me up at like I don't know 2, 3 in the morning, and she's like saying, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "What?" And I was crying, in my sleep, right? And she's like, waking me up, and I don't remember anything, but anyway, that morning we found out that my grandmother had died in the night. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, wow.
So again, it's like. And like I said, I'm not one to get emotional, whatever.
Yeah.
But I just felt that it was, that was always weird to me. That again, that might have been a coincidence, but
actually, can I tell a quick story that is kind of similar to that, because it also involves sleep, and also involves sleeping next to a girlfriend at the time. Once I was sleeping next to my girlfriend. I won't name her, just to spare her, because she's an ex-girlfriend, let's say. And she was sleeping, and she started mumbling to herself, and she started mumbling in French. It was very clearly French, and she's like, "Quelle horreur, omelette du fromage, le pomme de terre," like, just, I don't know whether fetch le vache. Anyway, she was speaking French words, and she said "quelle horreur" and something about like a landscape. And I mean, I knew a little bit of French. I took it in high school, but she was speaking French in her dream. Right. But my girlfriend, as far as I knew, didn't know French. She took Spanish in high school and had never been to France. And I just thought that was strange. And so the next morning, something happened. I don't know, someone almost got in a car accident, and my girlfriend was with me, and I leaned over and I was like, "Yeah, quelle horreur, huh?" Which means how terrible in French, right? And she's like, "What?" I was like, "Quelle horreur," and she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Don't you?" And I was like, "You were saying that last night in your sleep. You must know French. You were speaking French last night. You were like talking to yourself in French." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Don't you know?" And then I repeated to her the French words that she used, and she's like, "I have no idea what that means."
Yeah, like, dude, she was lying to you. She probably was dating some French dude on the side.
Yeah, she's dating some French guy on the side. Anyway, but yeah, just I don't know whether she was summoning that from some like subconscious or of course, one explanation, a true skeptic would just say she was mumbling and I was interpreting it as French. But
seeing pictures in the clouds, but with your ears rather than
with my ears, right? But it just sounded so French, with even the intonations of like "hong" and all the like the guttural sounds that the French use that the English speakers don't. And I was like, it just sounded just like you were speaking French. It was crazy.
The thing I'm going to tell you about, so I take the stance of a skeptic when I study this stuff. The thing I will say about skeptics, especially online skeptics, is that you're supposed to use the doubt in order to uncover the truth. If you're talking about, oh, well, you're just mishearing things. Most of communication is mishearing things and filling in the gaps. So you would essentially have to also state that normal communication as it is just as unlikely and unclear. So if you heard something, you heard something. That's just what it is.
Right. No, I mean, she was definitely mumbling in her sleep, but I just thought she was speaking like with this, and it was also not just French, but it was like with this like kind of spectral kind of weird voice, like almost like you'd hear in a horror movie if someone's possessed, They're speaking with a voice that you don't usually hear them speak with, using like muscles in their larynx or something that they don't usually use. And again, I mean, a skeptic would say, well, that was probably just because she was in a weird position, in her, a recumbent sleep pattern that I don't know. Anyway, but that was a strange thing that involved like having weird, almost like you were saying, Kevin, it almost seemed like you were intuiting you said your grandmother or your aunt?
Yeah, my grandmother.
Your grandmother's death at night.
Yeah.
But
Well, I've got a story to corroborate that then.
okay.
I was ready to go. We just finished doing our interviews, and we're preparing to go to Japan to teach English. And as I was finishing up the last bit of our, actually, I misread that. It was when we were filling out our application. I just filled out my application. I stood up from the computer and immediately smelled Old Spice. Now, I don't wear Old Spice, but it was a thick, strong smell of Old Spice. The only person I knew that wore it was my grandpa. And it was like the same kind of smell that he had when he would give me a big hug when I'd first see him.
Right.
Step was so strong, I actually looked at my wife and said, really bizarre. It just smelled really strongly of Old Spice, like when I would see my grandpa.
That's
He died
crazy.
that day.
Really?
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, but very like I imagine that the Old Spice was a very comforting kind of smell too, right? I mean, because I mean, that's yeah. I mean, it was weird.
Because there are numerous stories like this of smelling perfumes. Usually, it's extremely related to your olfactory senses with these sorts of experiences. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally particularly my memories are particularly triggered by smells more so than sights or sounds or anything like that. Like if I smell a smell that I was like, oh wait, last time I smelled this, I was like 5 years old in my grandmother's or my grandfather's garage or something, and it's like this particular mix of turpentine and something. It's that particular blend. If he must have been lacquering something or something. And I was like, wow, this is just a crazy experience. Just feeling like I'm 5 years old again. And just all these memories come flooding back, like literally triggered long suppressed memories. And they just come flooding back. Like I could remember the tablecloth on the card table in the, on the edge of the, garage or whatever. I just remember everything, the colors, gas cans, just.
But it was the trigger of sense that allowed that with your smell, right?
Right.
This is precisely why they use perfumes within the grimoires because it actually does prime more than that. There are actual physical interesting aspects of it. It actually connects when you burn incense, warm it being optimal. It connects your brain almost directly through your nose to an electromagnetic field that is created by the carbon within the air, right? And what's funny about this is that people are like, what are you talking about, electromagnetic field? Infrared masers are how moths navigate to flowers. It's the same phenomenon.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating.
Well, not just that. I always thought like how, when we see something, we're only really seeing its surface and how light reflects on its surface.
Right, exactly, yes.
And we're seeing it through the eyes, and it's like it just seems like a surface display. But when you smell something, it's rotten, or you can see underneath it. You can more about. Well, I mean, you could see rot on a fruit, but you can detect hidden things that are hidden from the eyes. Like if you have something in the closet, like if you put a bag of onions in there 6 weeks ago, you can smell it. You can't see it, but like it tells you things. And also, I'm sorry, you just ingest these things into your nose. They become part of your body, your bloodstream. Really, sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, yeah, that's kind of how they caught Jeffrey Dahmer. They smelled that.
You were onto something that's very Aristotelian. How eating a thing you become that thing. Except Jeffrey Dahmer still remains Jeffrey Dahmer, despite how many people. It's just bizarre.
Oh man, Jeffrey Dahmer is multiples.
No, but you know what though? I mean, just real quick, it's funny to this day, whenever I walk by like a candle display, right? always takes me back to the Necronomicon and like the whole spell books we're doing in junior high school, because we're like, we need candles, and then we would like always, every time I walk by, I would remind me of how bookstores smell and how, like the going into Readmore, because Readmore had that smell too, like the old
Kind of
old
musky book
bookstore.
smell. Yeah,
Yeah,
old books.
I love it because
Yeah,
like
a lot of
you
new
go
books
in.
don't have that same old smell.
No, dude.
You made
Oh,
candles?
no,
Made
we would
candles?
walk by we would walk by candles and use
Like a
them
candle
for,
store nearby.
yeah.
Because candles, that's a really fascinating thing. As I was talking about electromagnetic radiation,
Mhm.
wax has that unique capacity. It's called an electret. And usually
Yeah.
only crystalline structures have this capacity. They maintain an electrical charge perpetually. When you set, especially if, as it says in the Key of Solomon, the grimoire, if you set wax, and if you do a ritual, if you do any of these things, do it underneath an open sky, including when you set your candles, because then it takes on the charge naturally from the sky. It's really fascinating.
Huh.
Anyways, back to the thing. Actually, you just reminded me of a really creepy story when you were talking about onions. So this is when I had my first son. I was dropping him off at my parents' house because we had a 1 hour overlap between my wife and I when we would be switching between our jobs. Then
Mhm.
they'd come pick it up from my parents' house and take off. Anyways, so I was dropping off my son there for the hour so my wife could come pick him up. And as I turned to leave, out of the corner of my eye, it's always the corner of the eye, I saw a black figure, like blacker than black, because it was already black as all get out in the basement. Black figure lean out from my basement and look at me. And I felt the entire fight or flight reflex. Now, me being me, naturally, I just went, "Hey, I just saw a black figure just lean out of the basement. You know anything about that?" My mom freaked. She just flipped. "Oh my god, I always feel like I'm gonna be like strangled whenever I'm walking around down there. I had someone come and cleanse it." And I'm like, "Well, did that work?" Anyway, so I went to my friend Kim. I'm like, well, I just had this was the first time I've ever seen anything like that. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like freaking. I said, what do you do about this sort of stuff? He's like, well, in Eastern Europe, they still hang garlands of garlic around bassinets to ward off, evil spirits and all that. He goes, and that's kind of the tried and true thing. The nasty smell of alliums is uh, demon repellent, more or less. He goes, what's fascinating about this is, he goes, try quartering an onion, putting it in the corners of the room. Now he goes, there's an interesting thing about extremely low frequency electromagnetic radiation, the enzymatic breakdown of alliums. It causes them to rot more quickly. And also that radiation is correlated to paranormal like events.
Mhm.
So it's like a thermometer as well as a ward kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
asked my parents, can I put an onion in your basement? Because that was creepy. And I was surprised because my father just will not talk about any of that sort of stuff. And he's like, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and eat. That's fine. I'm like, really? Okay. So I quartered an onion, put it into the corners of the room. Cool. Enjoy that smell. So then one night later, I am in the middle of my sleep, and we had just fed Oliver, and he was an infant, not even a year old. And all of a sudden, it's 2 in the morning, and he starts just screaming. And I've never heard him scream like this before. So then I get up out of bed. I take him. He'd just eaten. I checked if he needed to be changed. Didn't need to be changed. I'm like, what the heck? So then I sat down in the rocking chair in the living room, and all of a sudden he just fell asleep. I'm like, what the heck? So I put him back in bed. Half an hour later, he's screaming again. I'm like, what's going on? So I pick him up again, and as soon as I sit down in the rocking chair, he's dead asleep again. I'm okay. This is just weird. I've never heard him scream like this. This is kind of creepy. So I left his nursery door open. Then I go back to bed at 3 in the morning. My wife and I awaken to the sound of the door to his nursery slamming shut. Now, I always think of heat pressure, and heat was not kicked on. I always think of anything that all the windows were shut. I'm like, what could have caused this door to slam shut? Regardless, I couldn't think of anything at that point in time, so I was scared absolutely like witless. Then I asked my mother, did you by chance remove those or keep the onions? Where are they at? And she's like, well, they were completely rotten, so I threw them away. I'm like, oh, well, you can keep it there. I'm just not going to say anything about that. You can just have it. So it seemed like if you were going to give context to this, what it seemed like is that by putting onions in the basement, whatever was down there kind of was upset about that and came to our house.
It's kind of creepy, man.
It's really fascinating, though.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. That's
I
cool.
got
Yeah.
two quick stories for you, real quick. So my dad was a psychologist, and he worked the graveyard shift at a hospital.
Ooh,
He was
fun. Awesome.
he was a crisis counselor for many years. Also in Las Vegas, in the graveyard shift in Las Vegas. So Kevin and I are both from Las Vegas. So the police would bring crazy people, quote unquote, who were running around the casinos at night, and they'd bring them to my dad, and my dad would assess them and kind of evaluate them, make sure they're not make sure they're not in any immediate danger to themselves or others. And then that he would determine whether they needed to just go to rehab or, what needed to be done with them. So he's like the first line of defense in processing these people that the police would bring in. So one day they brought this man into his office who had his eye dangling from its retinal strands. Like the eyeball was dangling from its retinal strands into a cup of water, into like a Dixie cup full of water.
What?
Like this. And so he sat down across from my dad, and my dad's like, "So, what happened here?" And the guy's like, "I plucked out my eye." And my dad's like, "Well, why'd you do that? Why'd you pluck out your eye?" And the guy's like, "Well, I was reading the Bible, and the Bible said, if your eye has seen sin, pluck it out." And so he did it. And my dad's like, maybe you shouldn't
take it literally, dude.
You don't need to take it so literally. But I guess he'd seen sin. I don't know. He didn't describe whether he'd been seeing actually like demons or devils, or if he'd just seen nudity or just he saw something.
Here's your dad's response to that. Well, that wasn't very, very smart, was it?
Well, it is literally sin.
That's what his dad, like his dad's very, very, very cut and dry.
Right. Well, now you got no eye.
Yeah, I got no eye.
What are you going to do now? Anyway.
My brother, likewise, is a psychologist. He is the coldly analytical one of the two of us as well. So
right. Actually, the other story I have many stories. Some of them are more paranormal. That one wasn't necessarily paranormal, but it was just a little, I don't know. He was following some diktat from an ancient scripture or whatever. It was just really strange to harm himself. Took it very seriously. But the other one was kind of similar in the sense that it didn't happen while my dad was at work, but it involved his work. So what happened was my dad and he was our coach for our basketball team. So, and actually Kevin was on that basketball team. So this is like when we were just kids.
Yeah.
Kevin was on my basketball team. My dad was the coach. And so we were going to practice, and it's like 6:30 at night in autumn. So the sun's already down. It's kind of evening. I don't know exactly. It's kind of getting dark. It's kind of getting a little spooky out there. It's probably in the fall to the autumn. And all of a sudden we're pulling out of the driveway to go to basketball practice. And this woman is walking up our driveway. And we're like, oh, that's weird. Someone's walking up our driveway, this kind of woman. And we noticed she had no shoes on, walking up our driveway. And then she goes up to our house and peeks inside our window. And so we stop the car at the end of the driveway, and we get out, and we're like, excuse me, ma'am, can I help you? Can we help you? And she's like, I'm looking for my son. And we're like, well, I don't think he's in our house. When was the last time you saw your son? And she's like, 10 years ago. And then I noticed she had bloody feet. Her bare feet were bloody. And I said, and we were like, how long have you been walking around looking for your son that's been dead for 10 years?
10 years. 10 years I've been walking around this
neighborhood. I've been looking for my son. No, but like,
he's in
I don't mean to make light of it or belittle her, but we were basically like, well, you've been looking for your son for 10 years. Did you last see him in this neighborhood? And she's like, no, just look. I was running. I saw some people were chasing me, so I ran here and I cut my foot, and now I'm looking for my son and haven't seen him in 10 years. Anyway, she was obviously like not
Dementia.
in her right mind.
Was she older, or was she like
No, well, she was probably in her 50s or something,
Okay.
you know. But when you're a kid, I was probably like 13, so she
Yeah,
just
she
seemed
was
like
like-
kind of an old lady. But
yeah, now it's kind
anyway,
of like I'm
so
sure she was young.
the interesting thing is, like later that night, so we called the police to come get her and to help, you know, not to arrest her, but just to like deal with her, because my dad knew this system. And basically what happened was the police put her in this same processing that he was involved in professionally, and he ended up seeing that same woman in his office that night. And he evaluated her and ended up talking to her even more. In fact, what happened was my dad's so chill about these things that here's this woman who seemed kind of crazy. And my dad's like, well, you know, what happened was my dad's like, we'd really like to help you, but we're late for basketball practice. So why don't you hang out in here with my wife? So he like brought her in. She ended up in our house.
Whoa, if I did that to my wife, I would have got an earful.
That's what I'm saying. I think my dad like probably did not do the right thing there, but
Hey, Lee, that was the beginning of the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the beginning of the end. So my parents, needless to say, got divorced. Not too long after that. Anyway, so yeah, that was a little creepy. Again, not so much paranormal, but just a little odd and creepy.
Well, we had like something, not like when we were kids. My folks went out to dinner, right? So it was me, my brother George, my brother Roy, and we're like sitting there like in the house. We hear a knock at the door, right? And then like going at like, and I'm 8 years old or whatever, and like all of a sudden we hear, "Is your mommy or daddy?" I was like just really creepy, like a male obviously trying to disguise his voice as a female.
Oh, really?
And we're like, yeah, it was.
Oh, that's so creepy.
Yeah, and then like we went, and like my brother Roy, luckily was just hitting puberty, so he came to the door. Was like, "Who is it?" And then they scampered off and got into a car and peeled out. But yeah, that's like some Texas Chainsaw Massacre stuff right there.
That's
like
super creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.